addictive drug, athletes, and opiates.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. How is everybody? I can't hear you. All right. So actually the lecture is called Cannabis, the Exit Drug. And I'm very happy and honored to be here. And I want to thank Martha and all the volunteers that have put this program together. And most of all, each of you for being here. I'm very proud to be here today. And if somebody had ever told me this was going to be something that I was going to be talking about through this journey, it's been an experience. And I'm proud to say I am a cannabinoid medicine specialist. I'm also proud to say I haven't written an opioid in 10 years. I am not part of the problem, I'm part of the solution. And I am a medical doctor. I have a master's in public health. I did my first life as a family physician after doing research in New Jersey and then doing my medical school there. I did my first life as a family physician, and I was all about taking care of all ages, from helping somebody get pregnant to helping somebody die. While I was in South Carolina, I was exposed to a lot of lead exposure among children. And I remember making that call to my parents and saying, you know, the hospital is the most dangerous place. And my father said, where did you think you were going to be working? And my journey took me to Massachusetts, and I ended up at Harvard doing my master's in public health and also my occupational medicine residency. And I fell in love with lead, and I did my fellowship in it, and I did a lot of research with it. I also am a medical review officer. Anybody peed in a cup for a drug test and got a call from a doctor? That was one of me. So my world involved testing people, and if you tested positive for this chemical known as THC, you lost your job. Today, my employees, if they pee in a cup, they better damn well test positive. Job requirement, okay? And I'm also one of approximately 45 doctors in the nation that could say I'm a certified cannabinoid medicine specialist through the American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine. And Dr. Berman is here, and I want to honor him as a mentor. There's many people out there writing recommendations, and they scare me a little bit, because I am still a doctor. I've just incorporated cannabis as a tool. And I spend 2 hours with my initial patients. I also educate them and understand what this is about. So I follow up my patients. I see them in 3 months, in 6 months, and every 6 months thereafter, as needed. So what are we facing today? In the United States of America, 5% of the world's population consuming 80% of the world's opioids. Unacceptable. We don't have any extra body parts or any different systems than anybody else. We use 3 primary drugs: narcotics, depressants, and stimulants. So you got somebody up, and somebody that doesn't know what the frig is going on. But this is what we're doing. And what we're seeing is it's killing people. Every 19 minutes, somebody's dying. And I think these numbers, I think there's more. This slide is an updated slide, yeah. The numbers are increasing, over 72,000 people. And what we're seeing in the population in the world is the younger people, less, and older people are living longer. Right now, we have 31 states and including the state I'm in Massachusetts where I practice, where we have medical and legal, and more to come. So on a global issue, what we're seeing is alcohol, which is available readily everywhere. It's part of our culture, socially accepted. Cigarettes, pharmaceuticals, these are the numbers. My plant, 0. Nobody has ever died in the world from this. So I look at this as a global issue. I look at cannabis as either medical or industrial. None of this recreational stuff. This medical and recreational is a form of segregation created by the United States of America. There's only one body, one plant, and one life. We're not going back 81 years. I look at this for 5 things. I want to see legalization all over the world. I want to see actual laboratory standards, which we don't really have. I want to see lots of products developed. And I want everybody to be able to grow this and know how to grow it and know it safely to grow it. And education. Education is the key. Stigma is a set of negative or unfair beliefs that a group or society has against something. And that something is cannabis. And I want everybody in the world to know about the endocannabinoid system. And I didn't know about this till about 10 years ago. All those degrees, never had I heard about the endocannabinoid system. It was my mother, about 10 years ago, who was dying of an illness known as idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Fancy term for we don't know what caused your lung disease. My mother had never smoked. She never worked in an occupation that should have had this exposure. She never ate red meats. She exercised and did all the right things. She had diabetes, high cholesterol, thyroid, Lyme's disease, and then what killed her was this lung disease. But it was her that instilled this. And I could still hear her saying, they're using ganja. I'm like, what is she talking about, ganja? I beelined it into the bedroom, and it was a TV program about how cannabis was used in Israel for COPD, asthma, lung cancer, and PTSD. That's where my inquisitiveness began. You mean to tell me you're gonna smoke, and you're gonna smoke weed, and it's gonna make you feel better and help you breathe? Did not compute. But I had to think. I'm an occupational medicine physician. I'm a primary care doctor. What do we give people that can't breathe? Well, my babies, we gave them nebulizer treatments. We gave inhalers. We gave steroids. And what did they do? They bronchodilated you. They brought down the inflammation. So you mean to tell me cannabis is a bronchodilator and anti-inflammatory? Yeah. So let's look at where we are in the society, though. Alcohol, readily accepted. Every christening, every death, every medical party we go to, they give you little vouchers for your drink vouchers too. Allowed. It's a depressant. It kills your brain cells, but it's legal. My plant, non-addictive, antidepressant, protects your brain cell, and has killed nobody, but it's illegal. So let's look at what's the difference between hemp and marijuana. The difference is the percentage of this THC. If it's less than 0.3%, it's considered hemp. If it's more than 5, it's marijuana. Pretty much that's the only difference, really. So these are some of my statements. Cannabis isn't for everybody, yet it should be the first line option, not the last resort. So I tell people, please, open your hearts. You don't need to use this, but you know somebody that can benefit from this. Open your minds, because we all, no matter where you are, has an endocannabinoid system. And I say, safety first and do no harm. Because my plants killed nobody. But if we don't make sure that we grow this properly, we can create a poison. So what's the choices that we have? Our pharmaceutical drugs that we keep doling out? Or this other option? As a primary care physician, I called it the party pack of 5. I wrote prescriptions for this day in and day out. Hypertension, diabetes, cholesterol, something for reflux, and then something for anxiety or depression, right? So that's the roles. This is what our patients face. I don't even know what they're taking, but we got it covered, right? I ask my patients 3 questions. Are you peeing? Are you pooping? And are you sexually active? Yeah, we get there eventually. The first 2 better be yes, and you'll be surprised how many people struggle with those 2. So when my patients come to me, they come to me as, do I go to this option now that's legally available? And we use 3 words, and in my practice that I've created, I call it total healthcare THC. Yeah, I want the THC, not just the CBD. Very important. You need the whole plant. And what we say is that this is about understanding harm reduction, understanding how to use it, and then all of my patients know about the endocannabinoid system. I can't say that about all my colleagues yet, but eventually that's my hope. We embrace cannabis as an option because by the time my patients get to me, they've been alienated. They've been thrown out. So we say this is about harm reduction. And we make them legal. I empower my patients. I say it's not healthcare, it's self-care. We teach them about the ABCDEs of life. A, once you're aware of something, hold yourself accountable. B, always be better or the best. Develop behaviors. You got a choice. Get committed to them. D, I know you're determined. Get disciplined. E, we educate you. That empowers you. And we say, yeah. Every one of us is a work in progress. The day I say I'm done, we're going to rest in peace. That's the philosophy. We hold monthly meetings. We call them patient caregiver support group meetings. This way, every patient has somebody that they can bring in, and it's all free. I've been doing it for over 4 years. So, I never use the word dose. Dose is a pharmaceutical word, and it means we know what the frig we got. We got nothing that we know about right now. So I use the word titrate. Titrate means a little bit at a time. Because every time you get a product, it's not the same. The package might look the same, but it's not the same. So rule number 1 of Dr. Uma's is always hydrate before, during, and after medicate. Rule number 2, you're going to start out low or very low and make sure you got food on board. Because cannabis can make you hypoglycemic, can make you a little anxious. So food. And titrate up or down. And journal. Because that's how you learn how this works for you. Because every time it's a little different. It's not the same. And I have 3 sets of patients, I see. Patients that have never ever used cannabis. Patients that are self-medicating, not recreational, self-medicating. And patients sort of in my age group in their 50s that got used to it maybe in their high school or college years and now are coming back. And we got 3 sets of healthcare providers. Healthcare providers that have no knowledge, some knowledge, and some that are curious about it. But it's how they treat my patients. They either alienate them, and even the mention of it, they're thrown out. God forbid they got peed in a cup and tested positive for being in one of those programs. Some say, okay, if it's working for you, they tolerate it. And some physicians and healthcare providers say, hey, you know, I work for this thing called the federal government. I can't really talk about it, but tell me how it's working for you, okay? What's the impact on my patients? I'm getting them off their pharmaceuticals, narcotics, alcohol, and nicotine, yeah? We have an improvement in their quality of life. They care for themselves. They become mindful. Some of them start to work. They have relationships, first with themselves, their family members, their significant others. They enjoy some of their hobbies that they never got to do. And they have these things called recreational activities that they can get back to. And guess what? They lose weight. Yeah. And I see generations come together. I see grandmothers, daughters, children, all three of them sometimes in my office. There's an improvement in their sex life, their spirituality, and even sanctity and sanity. And I call it the norm. So let's talk a little bit about history. We've known about this for over 5,000 years. It was used by the Chinese for treating gout, malaria, rheumatism, and yes, forgetfulness. So Cannabis is the name of the family, Sativa genus. The genus is Cannabis sativa. There's 3 species, Sativa, Indica, and Rhodalis. The 2 bigs that we talk about is Sativa and Indica. It's had different names. Cannabis, canna means stalk or fiber. Bis means plant with 2 sexes. It's had different names. Marijuana, Mary Jane, ganja, pop, reefer, hash. It has over 400 different chemicals, over 100 different cannabinoids. In India, where I'm originally from, the Ayurvedic doctors knew about it, and it was one of the 5 sacred plants. And they said cannabis, a source of happiness, joy giver, liberator, that compassionately gives humans help to obtain delight and lose fear. Yes. And releases from anxiety. And Lord Shiva knew about this. They had bright holidays and festivities that we celebrate. We've known about it to quicken the mind, and it cured dysentery, helped with sleep. The Greeks knew about it. O'Shaughnessy first learned about this in India, in Calcutta, in 1833, and I went back in 2016 to the World Ayurvedic Conference and gave a lecture about how cannabis and the endocannabinoid system. He first learned about this, and O'Shaughnessy was the doctor that actually talked about fluid replacement. They knew if you had diarrhea and you didn't treat it, you died. Still the same even now. Fluid replacement that he created is still used today. But he's the one that brought this information to Europe and the United States. Hundreds of papers were written even back then. The United States of America listed it in its pharmacopoeia. Yeah, used in this country from 1850 to 1942. And one of the indications was opioid addiction, folks. Yeah, it's nothing new. So let's awaken to this. Alcoholism, neuralgia, treatment of insanity. Not the cause, but the treatment of. They had asthma cigarettes. Yeah, because we didn't have inhalers back then. So what did you do? You inhaled. And inhalation is a delivery system. They had tinctures. My dad worked for Park Davis, created Benadryl. But these were the kind of medicines that they had. Doctors had the liberty to write a prescription. Today, I can write a recommendation only, because cannabis is in Schedule 1, along with heroin, LSD, and ecstasy, meaning that there's no medical use, no research, and a potential for abuse. Lies, lies, lies. Queen Victoria's doctor prescribed it for menstrual cramp. The first Lancet, Dr. Reynolds wrote in it and said, when pure and administered carefully, cannabis, one of the most valuable medicines we possess, folks. In India, the Hemp Commission wrote an article because it was concerned, could this be addictive? Could there be abuse from it? And the Commission's report was, cannabis has no addictive properties and a number of positive emotional and social benefits. And that's what we're talking about today, folks. Ultimately, harm reduction. And it knew about for stimulating appetite, concentration, incontinence. Some of my seniors use it for that reason too. 1930 is when things changed, and there was a badass by the name of Harry Anslinger, and this concept of gateway drug was then created. Beware, young and old people of all walks of life, this may be handed to you by a friendly stranger. It contains the killer drug, marijuana, a powerful narcotic in which lurks murder, insanity, death. Dope peddlers are shrewd. They may put some of this in your tea or tobacco cigarette. They created movies and books, and then they created a stamp tax. And when this went about, people had no idea what they were talking about. So to summarize, in 1600, you were mandated to grow this, otherwise you went to jail. Today, you go to jail for growing it. 1850 was part of our medicine. And in 1915 is when things changed. They said, all Mexicans are crazy, and this stuff, marijuana, is what makes them crazy. Yeah. Reefer madness, was insane. Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. That's what he said. I wish I could show you what a small marijuana cigarette could do to our degenerate Spanish-speaking residents. That's why our problem is so great. Marijuana is the most violent drug in the history of mankind. I want to rewrite that sentence. Marijuana is the safest drug in the history of mankind if we protect it. That's what put it into prohibition. Every part of this plant can be used, folks. Every part can be used for some product, and that's what was changed it. Cannabis is food, fuel, fiber, paper, and medicine. And it got replaced with the Hearst, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Mellons, and they had the badass mouthpiece, Harry Anslinger. Greed. And that's what could take over again now. Popular Mechanics talked about this in a magazine, 25,000 products that could be created. And there was a machine called a decorticator that should have been available, but the Hearst family took the patent, squashed it, because they didn't want this to come about. They wanted the paper mills. Ford built a car completely that ran and was built by him. Imagine where our world would be had these tyrants had not taken over. Right? Dr. Mashula, meanwhile, was doing his research in Israel, and he discovered THC, and he's known as the grandfather of cannabis. He's also the first one that was involved with identifying Ananda mind. And Ananda in our Hindu religion from Sanskrit means joy, eternal bliss. Ellie is still one of our patients that's receiving medicine from the government. Yes, the government has a program that gives weed to our patients that are still alive. So let's talk about the history of what happened. In 1938, there was a mayor in New York and said, I don't believe this. And there was a LaGuardia report. That report magically disappeared. And in that report, they summarized that marijuana was not the determining factor of the major crimes. And this was not the problem. But at the same time, in the 1960s, we had the Beatles, and in 1970s, when everything changed. 1970 is also the year I came to this country. OSHA was created, the Controlled Substance Act was created, and that's when we created the schedules, and cannabis was placed in Schedule A. The Single Convention Act was in 1961, and this is what keeps all over the world the problem of why legalization is not there. 1975, Robert Randall became the first patient that was involved in an investigational new drug program. And again, there's 4 patients that are still part of the program. 2 are actually getting it. In 1999, they completely shut the program down from an influx of all the applications. The United States of America has a patent, folks. They told you they have no evidence, but they have the patent that was issued on October 7, 2003. We just celebrated 15 years. And it states cannabinoids, all of them, as an antioxidant and neuroprotectant, not neurotoxic, neuroprotectant. They've known about it for treatment of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, strokes. Let's talk about addictions. Addictions can happen to anything, and cannabis can be used as an addiction, but it's not something that if you stop that you're going to die from. Let's look at where drugs come about. Noam Chomsky said it so beautifully. He said, drugs are FDA approved, cannabis is people approved, and that's where it stands. Cannabis is 20 times an anti-inflammatory than aspirin, twice as stronger than hydrocortisone. Cannabis and PTS. I leave the D off because I suffer with PTS, and I'm not a disorder and I am not a disease. It's post-traumatic stress. And when we look at PTS, it's real. It's a real thing that happens, and trauma can be physical or some other ways as well. It's not a social thing or a political opinion. It's a real physical injury. And what happens with PTS is that the patients come in with so many symptoms, and doctors have 7 to 10 minutes. So what happens? You get a prescription. 1 prescription, 2 prescriptions, 3 prescriptions, and it goes on. And people are now dying from the prescriptions, committing suicide from the meds that they're getting. And what we're realizing is that in PTS, there's actually a deficiency. And I relate PTS to athletes, which we're going to be talking about later today. CTE and PTS are very similar to me. And what we're realizing is that the receptors are much more heightened in PTS patients. The endocannabinoid system, my favorite system. And what we realize is that this has evolved from a sea squirt to what we have in humans today, over 600 million years, and yet only 15% of the medical schools only teach it. Unacceptable. What we know is that the system, there's CB1 receptors, primarily in the brain, CB2 receptors, primarily in the immune system, but it's everywhere. Yet, nobody's died from it. Aren't you curious why? Well, what do people die from? Either respiratory depression, like when my mother died, or from cardiac arrest, meaning that either your heart stops beating or you can't breathe. And with cannabis, you may feel like you're gonna die, but you're not. Truly, I've seen people, but no, you're not gonna die. And what's also unique is that when we talk about a nervous system, which is very analogous to, when we talk about dopamine and serotonin, they're made in the presynaptic and they're released and they bind to the receptors on the post. Endocannabinoids are unique. They're made on demand from the post and they bind to the receptors on the pre. So it's a retrograde mechanism and it's constantly trying to balance us. And what we know is the 2 endocannabinoids that are well studied, anandamide and 2-AG. There's enzymes that break it down, and this is where the science is going to be. Looking at people's receptors, understanding what varies, what are those enzymes that cause it to increase or decrease. Dr. D'Amato, who I had the honor of meeting, puts this beautiful system in 5 words. He says that the endocannabinoid system helps us to relax, eat, sleep, forget, and protect. And this is my mantra. Let's look at those 5 words. If your muscle is constantly twitching, or it doesn't move at all. If you eat too much, obesity. If you don't eat enough, anorexia. If you sleep too much, depression. If you don't sleep enough, PTS. Insomnia. If you forget too much, Alzheimer's, dementia. If you don't forget enough, PTS. I say this jokingly, if a woman remembered childbirth, guys, you ain't ever getting laid again. So thank God we forget, right? It's equally important to forget as it is to remember. protection, overprotection, autoimmune, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, all of these autoimmune diseases that we see. But what if you can't protect? You're immunocompromised, cancer treatments, diabetes. So what we realize is that we have endocannabinoids that are produced within our own body on demand, limited amounts. We have phytocannabinoids that we can get from plants, and synthetic drugs. All of these work with the receptors to bring about the balance. And then the mind, which is mimicked in our body. First drop of breast milk a baby receives has anandamide in it. And this molecule mimics THC. That's why it works so beautifully in our body. In animal studies, when they blocked this, the animals didn't suckle. And if they didn't suckle, they died. And I describe the endocannabinoid system in one word, life. And they friggin' forgot to teach it to me. I'm a little perturbed. So I look at this as a deficiency. What we're realizing is that in Dr. Ethan Russo's work, migraines, fibromyalgia, IBS, if you give cannabis to these patients, we see resolutions, and that's what it's all about. Why not? And what we see also is an overactivity in obesity. By giving them the right amount, there's a balance. And I'm seeing this so well where we've had patients lose 150 pounds or more. And the patients that need to gain it also gain it. So there are synthetic drugs that are out there. There's Marinol that's been around for a long time, Sesamet, Acomplia, and Epidec. Marinol is still there and it's in Schedule 3, and doctors can write a prescription for it, but too much of this can kill you. Sesamet is another one. Acomplia, thank God it never made it to the United States. Drug companies decided, you know, if you use cannabis, you get the munchies, so let's block it to lose the appetite. Yeah, they blocked it, all right. 6 feet under, people died from suicides. So thank God it never made it. Epidiolex is now out there, more to come from it, and now it's placed on Schedule 5. Delivery systems. So we understand now that heating it in different temperatures and different ways and how you consume it, from inhalation to ingestion, can vary. There's people consuming it in different ways, different ages. Inhalation is what I recommend because I feel it's easily titratable for our patients starting out. My patients range from 18 to 98. My seniors will come in and say, Dr. Uma, I don't want to get high, and I don't want to smoke it. And I'm like, fine. They come back in for their 3 months. Dr. Uma, I got me a pipe. And if they understand that they can use a small amount and it works very easily. Ingestion is a great way of combining it. I look at it as, do you want short acting or long acting? And we teach patients that ingesting is a longer action. And patients are really smart. So my patients that have had a history of alcohol abuse might go to the glycerin products. My patients that are diabetic understand to use the alcohol products. So learning. Topicals are amazing. And they're using it in combinations with even some DMSO alcohol and different ways of combining it. This is my game that I really believe in, is suppositories. It's the way to go. And I really want to talk about this as a line that I want to create as a way for all people to use it. Orally, vaginally, rectally, any way. Lick it, eat it, shove it up, anyway. It's a great delivery system. The rectum and the mouth are delivery systems, folks. And when you have a patient seizing or nausea, it's great. And even for my women with all sorts of menorrhagia, vaginal dryness, great way, folks. Improves the sex life too. Another whole conversation, but effects. What we see is it really depends on the product, the duration, how long patients are using it. And you know, they talk about those forms because I say quantify it. That's the way I talk about those, not as far as milligrams. The route of administrating, again, short-acting, long-acting, understand that if you're combining it with other drugs, this is the pharmacokinetics of anything that's metabolized by the liver versus going through the kidney system, understanding drug interactions. I tell my patients, anything that gets metabolized by the liver, including alcohol, avoid if you're going to ingest cannabis. As far as the side effects and what you can expect, hyperemesis, this has been in the news. Again, too much, and I really think it's about what's in the product, the pesticides and contamination. Nausea, vomiting that we see, paranoia, anxiety, and again, overwhelm. Let people know that this can happen, and they'll get over it slowly. And again, it's not for everybody. Understand this, how it works as a bronchodilation, antiemetic, appetite stimulation, analgesics, decreases muscle spasticity, decreases ocular pressure. All of these different things that I'm using it for, from ADHD to sleep disorders, glaucoma patients, OCD, PTS, MS. We understand that this plant has so many different cannabinoids, more to learn. Cannabis and cancer, when I hear that word cancer, I feel it should be the first line option, not the last. 7 out of 10 people treated with chemotherapy die. 7 out of 10 people treated with cannabis will survive. 4 basic properties that people have to understand. When we treat people for cancer, what do? We whack their bodies off chemotherapy, radiation, some immunotherapy, and steroids. So cannabis works in 4 specific properties. It says to the cancer cell, I'm not going to let you multiply, anti-proliferation. I'm not going to let you spread, anti-metastatic. I'm going to cut your blood supply off, anti-agenesis, and it says, I want you to die, apoptosis. 4 very specific properties. We know with our patients with Crohn's and GI, CB1 and CB2 receptors are in the gut, and we talk about gut health is so important. Fibromyalgia patients, these patients are gone to so many doctors, so many pills. It helps because cannabis is able to treat all their symptoms in different ways. MS patients, again, spasticity, pains, and even hoping to not progress the disease as well. Tourette's, my patients that have Tourette's have been treated like they were psych patients. And these patients, actually, this is the only thing that works for them sometimes. Traumatic brain injury, I look at this medicine for prevention, maintenance, and treatment. And I really believe that this should be used for all ages. And I tell people, start, if you don't want to use the cannabis plant, start with hemp seeds. That's legal. Start with 3 tablespoons every day, 1 serving. Get it up there to 3 times a day. I have it on my table. I give it to my patients. I eat it too. So traumatic brain injuries, athletes, anybody. Any kind of brain injury is not enough. Everything should be paid attention to. Understand with Lyme's disease, my mom had it. There's so many chronicity of these diseases. A lot of doctors don't even believe that people have it. They do have it. Helps with brain injuries. We know in studies that they looked at where they tested these people that were positive for cannabis, the people that tested positive for cannabis were more likely to survive a brain injury than if you were not. We know that in states that where we have a medical program and you have a dispensary available, that we see opioid reduction by 25% in the first 2 years, 33% in the next 5 to 6 years. We see that Medicare dollars have decreased 165 million years, and that was just looking at from 2010 to 2013. It could have been over 470 million. We know that if you offer it to patients, they prefer this, but they're not given this choice. We know that in alcohol reduction, in the states that have it, they're saying 13%, actually it's more. There's some good information out there. Normal has put out some information, and this report came out, the health effects of cannabis and cannabinoids. Look at it, and again, always look at who's incentivizing these reports. And understand that Dr. Donald Tashkin looked at cannabis and the effects of it. They looked at 4 groups of people: people that never used cannabis, people that used tobacco, people that smoked nothing, and people that did both. And the people that used cannabis had less lung cancer than people that smoked nothing. Yeah, because it's an antioxidant as well and protecting. And then they said they looked at the other 2 groups, people that smoked tobacco and cannabis. People that use tobacco and cannabis had less lung cancer than people that use tobacco alone, again protecting. There's some references. I want to leave you with what Dr. Uma says. Cannabis is for, I call it the 5 Ps. It's for people, it's for pets, it's for the planet, it's for peace, and it's for profit. Summary, it's a plant medicine, it's killed nobody, it's in Schedule 1 along with heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. unacceptable. Remember that it's politics and not evidence-based medicine. I call it life. Remember the mantra, relax, eat, sleep, forget, and protect. And it was prescribed by doctors. It was in the pharmacopoeia from 1850 to 1942. Remember the three words, educate, embrace, and empower. And I always say, reach one, teach 10. And I'm out there screaming at the top of my lungs, and I ain't stopping. And Dr. Meshulam said, these receptors are in our body, so the plant's there for a purpose. And I want to leave you with my statement. Cannabis is not an entrance drug. It's an exit drug from pharmaceuticals, narcotics, alcohol, and nicotine. Safety first, do no harm. I want to leave you with my words. Thank you all. Cannabis for opiates.
If you have some questions since they're behind, I'll ask Dr. Dhanabalan or Dr. Uma. She actually has 2 minutes.
This is not a question.
No.
That is brilliant. This is, I do a lot of public speaking. This was 5 to 10 times better than any talk that I've ever given. You were absolutely fantastic, and
And on that note, let's take a coffee break.
Oh.